Hey, good afternoon. How you doing? This is Dwayne Stratford again, NERC Compliance Director here at TRC, for part two of our series on NERC CIP compliance. Again, back again with me is Mr. Brandon Miller. I'll kick it over to you for another reintroduction.
Hi, thanks, Dwayne. Brendan Miller. I'm a NERC CIP compliance specialist. Been with TRC just a little over a year now. Started out my career in the United States Navy in IT and cybersecurity network operations, and then transitioned over to municipal electric utility, and then was working in compliance as well as EMS administration, everything from point-to-point testing, cybersecurity operations to compliance. So glad to be here.
Hey,
Thanks, Dwayne.
appreciate you. Appreciate you. So part two of our conversation in the NERC CIP compliance space, we wanted to talk about CIP-007 in particular, security patching and security patch management. I know you have that 35-day window upon which you want to make sure that you have all your patches up to date, OTIT, and everything in between. You think about it, 35 days seems to be a pretty big enough window that you should be able to manage your patches in a timely manner. But it still tends to be a struggle in the industry. You know, from your vantage point, what do you think are some of the things that makes it difficult to manage that 35-day window?
Yeah, I certainly agree. It seems like 35 days would be a pretty good amount of time, and especially consider Microsoft's putting out patches like once a week, patch Tuesday and all that. I think the challenge comes in, if you imagine, for example, like a medium-sized utility, maybe they've got, 200 cyber assets or maybe 300 for that matter. It doesn't sound like it'd be a big deal, but when you consider that each asset may have 10 or 20 patches each, and those patches may have individual components that you have to evaluate for each individual patch, it quickly compounds into, sometimes what seems like an unmanageable amount of, back end work because you've got to go in and evaluate each patch. Is this patch truly security related, or is it just a feature update, right?
I don't know.
Really only required to patch for security. Not that the nice features wouldn't be nice to have, but it's not required. When it comes to the patching, you've got 35 days to evaluate it. And then so that's the key there is that once you evaluate it, then you have to make a determination. Okay, are we going to patch? Are we going to mitigate? And do we have to put a mitigation plan into effect? Or are there some other circumstances that are at play, right? And then once you patch it, then you have to verify that the patch was successful and that sort of thing as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of moving parts. I think that's one of the major challenges with this being one of the, historically speaking, most heavily violated standards. But it's just got a lot of nuances to it. I think that's what causes the issue.
Yeah. And just like we talked in the first video, we talked about the SIP2 categorization, substations, control centers, what have you. And one of the most common traps that folks fall into is when you have a miscategorization of a substation, then you have those assets out there that should be applicable to SIP-7. They're not getting security patching. They're not getting the management that they need, which is why it's so important to know the upstream and downstream impacts of all the standards in particular. So, are there any other traps that you can see that would lead to folks kind of missing the opportunity to incorporate internal controls to make sure that they're managing their patches within the 35-day time window?
I think being plugged into whoever the vendor is, right? HP or, really any of those major vendors out there, you need to be on their list, right? So are they sending out email updates? Hey, when are we applying? When are we releasing new patches? Are we releasing it monthly? Are we releasing it weekly? Or sometimes even some vendors may not patch their systems for like 6 months. So you may get a random email, and if it ends up in somebody's inbox and you don't know about it, um, especially if somebody's left or that sort of thing, you could potentially miss a patching window, and that's certainly a concern. I think the backstop to that is having multiple people that are receiving that notification, as well as verifying that each piece of equipment, whether it be firmware, software, really anything for that matter, is being checked to make sure that there's no updates for it.
Yeah, and we've always talked about formal documentation, making sure to memorialize institutional knowledge, sharing the wealth, communication, transparency, data sharing, all that other good stuff. What are some of the components that you can see that would go into a very mature security patching program?
I think it certainly starts from the top down. Having that awareness, that everything is being evaluated, having the necessary personnel, receiving those communications, having it in your policies, procedures, your overall compliance program awareness is important. But all the way down to the SMEs, do they have the necessary training? Apply the patches, or whoever is applying the patches, how are they validating that those were successful? Sometimes when you apply a patch, it doesn't always stick and you have to reboot or maybe try again. And if you're not verifying that, you could potentially have a problem there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then outside of that, are there any consequences that that personally experienced, or better yet, are there any consequences that come about not properly maintaining your patches that folks need to be aware of in order to encourage them to be more mindful in managing their patches?
Sure. I mean, there's always that, the NERC stick, right? I mean, if you're not doing what NERC says you're supposed to do and it gets found out, it, you'd be fined potentially up to $1 million per day per violation. And if you're talking, like I said, 300 systems, you compound that out over all those systems. Maybe the first occurrence won't be nearly that severe, but if it continues to be a trend, which again, this being one of the historically most violated standards, it's possible, then those fines begin to kind of ratchet up. So having that awareness around, are these patches being applied successfully, or do you need to develop mitigation plans? Because, the patch literally could break something, right? These systems have to be up 100% of the time, all the time. And if you have to take it down for a patch, what are those ramifications, right? But
Yeah. And then how do you strategically leverage your GRC tool? You know what I mean? No matter what tool you have, how do you leverage that to be able to monitor when the patches are coming out, when to get them done, how to coordinate with all the other groups that are dependent upon a centralized notification system, you know?
right, right. I agree that, a lot of these, GRC tools, worth their weight, that is, are going to have some sort of other hook, to where you can interface via some sort of communication protocol, whether it's reaching out to the web to see, okay, are my switches up to date, or is my SCADA system in general, do I have any updates for that, or my Windows systems? I mean, Windows is always getting patched. There's always, things to fix, and they're always going to keep finding things. And then on the other side of that, do you have a means to get, those, to verify those are going back into the GRC tools? So once your systems are being patched, let's say you have some sort of monitoring software that's looking at those systems to see, was that critical, vulnerability addressed, and is it getting back to the GRC tool? I think that's one of the ways you can help your compliance team be aware that you are compliant, because otherwise, it's effectively kind of like a black box, right?
Yeah, and it all goes back to the evidence request tool, because the main thing we want to do too, just like with SIP 2, is find ways to strategically leverage existing workflows and processes to little by little update the evidence request tool, so it becomes more of a practical action item and checkpoint along the way, so that you're not waiting all the way to the end, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior to an audit,
Right,
to
right.
do all that work. But if you can do that work strategically along the way, I think it makes it a lot less stressful getting ready to get ready for an audit if you're always updating the evidence request tool in near real time, and then setting up your controls to where you do a monthly or quarterly check and all the updates that need to happen into the evidence request tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, man, as always, appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. Um, and we'll definitely look forward to part 3 of the series, and we'll be back in touch.